Hi, very good afternoon to everyone. This is Dr. Nick once again. We are going to discuss another interesting qualitative method this week, that is on audience study. Before I proceed, I would like to stress and emphasize here that as media and communication scholar, all of us have got to deal with audience, regardless if you intend to be filmmaker or you intend to be professional public relation officer. We always have got to deal with our audience. In fact, if you want to be an influencer, you still have got to face audience. So in short, audience is very, very important in communication and media study. All right. So I think we have 2 weeks to discuss about audience study. So for this week, I have very simple few slides to explain to you what is media study, right? So let us slowly dive into the information about audience study. For this week, we have 2 aims. The first is for us to explore how audiences interpret and how do they make meaning from the media content or marketing content that perhaps we produce or maybe somebody else's produce, that we want to understand how the audience accept or not accepting the content, or how do they interpret it. It is very important so that we understand their needs and their wants for further content creation. All right. Number 2, the aim for today's class is to understand the audience's feelings, attitudes, and also experiences in depth when they watch or read the media content that provided to them. By understanding their feelings and attitudes and experiences, we understand what they want, what they need, and we can figure out why did they react in such a way when they see or read certain media content. All right. Of course, media content definitely can shape audience perspective or perceptions on certain issues, but we want to know why did audience reacted that way. Yeah. So in simpler meaning, it is very important for us communication scholars to understand our audience. For this week, the outcome of this lecture, I hope at the end of this lecture, you will be able to explain how audience interpret media content, why do they interpret it such a way, and hopefully we are able to identify factors that influence their responses. That is very important because we just don't predict, we just don't assume, but as media scholars, we have got to understand the whys and how the audience reacts to certain media contents. So that is the outcome that I hope you are going to achieve after this 1 hour lecture. Let's move on to this important slide, the definition of audience study. So an audience study is a systematic analysis of a group of people, okay, who consume or engage with media, messages, or content. Qualitative method will not look at a group of huge number of population or people, yeah, but in certain group of people. For example, you want to study the audience that you define as university students. So qualitative research, qualitative method, we don't really look at big, huge population samples. However, let me remind you that when we study audience, it can be in qualitative manner and it can also be in quantitative manner. So you have two ways of doing it. But of course, in this lecture, it's only focusing on qualitative method, audience study. So in qualitative audience study, we aim to understand who is the audience first. We want to know who is the audience that consumes certain method, certain content, sorry. What do they think when they look at the content? And how do they behave when they look at the content? And the last bit is how do they actually interpret the message? That is the most important thing. So there are four things that is extremely important. Who are they? What they think when they look at the content? How do they react or behave when they look at the content? And how do they interpret the message? For example, a group of people actually interpret the message uh, based on their background, maybe educational background, where they live, how do they live their work, their life, and things like that. So these four things are very important. So in short, actually, audience study is about studying people on the receiving end of communication. Yeah, how the people who receive uh, the content that produced by influencer, by you yourself, as content provider, or maybe by the media, journalists and editors. So if we looked at the linear communication line, so we have the producer and then at the end we have the receiver. So that receiver is the audience that we want to study. So obviously, audience study is commonly used in fields like media study, obviously, communication in general, journalism definitely, advertising and marketing most importantly, because we have got to understand our audience. Just by understanding our audience, we can come out with very effective advertisement and also marketing strategies, because we don't only do marketing to all of people, we have targeted audience, so we have got to understand our audience. By explaining just in one slide, I hope you understand why audience study is important for communication scholars like us, right? Okay, next one. We have got to understand few key aspects of audience study. In a simpler word, we have got to understand why do we do audience study. So common approach in qualitative normally, okay, in qualitative, if you can see the pointer here, we actually do interview, we do focus group discussion, we can do ethnography as well, because we want to find deep understanding of opinions and meanings from the audience. Remember just now I mentioned audience study can be quantitative. In quantitative manner, normally quantitative researcher will always do survey, okay? But in qualitative, we focus on interview and focus group discussion. In interview, obviously, because the nature of qualitative, we cannot generalize the findings. So it is one of the challenges when we do audience study using interview. That's why most of communication scholars trying to look for focus group discussion instead of in-depth interview, because within like short period of time we can collect a lot of data from a group of people. Of course, we can always do in-depth interview or structured interview if we have plenty of time. Yeah. So audience study is an audience study. It can be done in qualitative manner. It can also be done in qualitative manner. Right. Let's look at the key aspects of audience study. There are four. Why do we want to study audience? And we have got to understand their characteristics. The first one is audience characteristics, which include demographic and social information. For example, demographic falls under age, gender, and level of education, or where do they live, for example, in urban areas or rural areas. Other social information is like income level, all right, or their culture, their beliefs, their value, their religion, and those are the things that we call it audience characteristic must be understood well before we can proceed with deeper understanding of audience based on the content that we want to further study. So number two, their behavior. So how we have got to understand how audiences actually interact with media. What do they watch? What do they read? What do they listen to? So when and how often they engage with the content. For example, in Malaysia, um, a lot of research found that people actually, especially young people, they will they are active at night from 8 p.m. until 3 a.m. While working group of people like me, we actually are active between 7:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. before we start our work, and we will be active again at 4 until 7. Okay, so the pattern is different. That is audience behavior. When and how certain group of people engage with the content, media content. And what platform do they use? I still watch TV. I use Instagram and Facebook, but most of my students actually they don't like Facebook. They love TikTok more. So we have got to understand about media audience behavior as well. For example, if you are a marketer, you want to market certain products, you are targeting people my age, for example. You don't like promote your product at night. You promote your product in the morning, the time that when a lot of people like me, a group of people like me, like very active and scrolling our social media. So that is why audience behavior is very important. Number three, we also must understand how audience actually and interpret the content that they watch or they read. We have got to understand how people understand and make meaning from the content. For example, when I watch a film or an advertisement or a news, the meaning that I make is definitely based on my knowledge, my interest, and my background. Definitely, it will be different from my friend, my colleague at the university, how they actually make meaning or interpret it differently. So different audience may interpret the same message differently because it influenced by our experiences, belief, interest, and background. So we have got to understand that as well. Because if we um, look at ourselves as position ourselves as journalists when we wanted to come out with something, or maybe we are newscaster, we want to attract or engage our audience, we have got first to know who is watching us. All right, that is very important. Number four, as I mentioned just now, the needs and motivations of the audience. What motivates them to watch you as newscaster? What motivates them to see your TikTok uh, short videos? Yeah, um, do they need to read the news that you produce? The needs and wants are two different things. Needs maybe um, it talk about uh, they really want, they really have to watch or read the news, and there are factors that motivate that. Let's look at few information here. Why audience consume media? What kind of media? Information, is it about news, about education, entertainment maybe, or so just for social connection in social media, or is it because of personal identity? So normally we try to understand their needs and also their motivation. So these are four key aspects of audience study that we have got to understand. And once we understand, and if you have something in your mind, in your head that interests you to study about audience, so please look at this aspect and try to understand it further so that you can construct your research design more effectively to get data, yeah, from your audience. So let me give you, I have already given you some information from few slides earlier about audience study. Now let me give you one example. I hope by giving an example, actually you understand it better. My students always understand better when I give them example. So one of the example that I would like to give is on audience study on skincare brand marketing. All right. For example, you and your friends actually wanting to market a new skincare brand in your country. Maybe it that brand is a local brand, yeah, and you before you actually go to the market, you have got to understand first your audience, what they want, what they like best. Do they have money to buy your product? And other than that is that we have got to understand the group, the targeted group that you are focusing. Are they like liking other brands, and is it local brand or is it international brand? Do they have money to buy and things like that? For example, maybe you want to target the young people. Okay, mind you, actually, skincare also marketed to people like me. Okay, middle-aged people as well. So, but in this example, let's focus on young people. So the aim here, as an example, we want to know how young people perceive skincare brands promoted on TikTok. just put another one sentence here, local skincare brand, okay? Local skincare brand. So you want to know how the young people actually perceive skincare brand. Do they believe, do they trust the seller on TikTok stating that, oh, this brand is good and things like that, okay? So you want to understand your audience, and with with that understanding, you can market your brand much more effectively. So the objective of this research is to explore how Gen Z audiences interpret and trust skincare content shared by influencers, for example. In this case, maybe you try to get two influencers, very um, important influencers that have a lot of followers. So you actually do qualitative method. You do focus group discussion with university students. Remember, we discussed about focus group discussion. Maybe you do like 4 focus group discussion. In one of the discussion, in one of the focus group discussion, you have about like 6 people or maybe 10. So if you have already done, you do 4. So if 5, so you have 20 respondents. All right. Or you can do in-depth interview. All right. If you have time, and you participate you show the TikTok video from skincare influencer, maybe 2 skincare influencer, you show it to them and you ask them what do they think about the promotion made by the influencer in the TikTok video, right? You ask them that. And then you ask them whether do they trust the influencer when the influencer say that, oh, this product is really good, that when I use it for less than 1 month, it's really whiten my face or make my skin very flawless and brighter, you know. So you ask them whether they trust or whether what is their interpretation or perception on the content itself. Maybe one influencer is better than other. Okay, so that is very simple example of audience study in qualitative method. Yeah, you show it to them and you ask them questions. Okay, um, with that, if you are focusing, for example, you want to produce or you want to market, promote local skincare brand in your university, uh, small targeted audience, then you actually know that, oh, okay, these are the things that Gen Z or university student trusted the most, and this how much only certain amount of money that they can spend to buy. So you try to actually link within the amount of money that they can afford to buy with the quality of the skincare itself. So they are some combination of how do I say, the affordable price that they can afford, and also the quality of product that you can give to them what they want. Do they want brighter skin, or do they want to be a little bit like slim, not too you know, they want to not to keep their body fit and things like that. Okay, so that is one of very simple example that I can give on audience study. All right. Now, when we talk about audience can be divided into 2. All right. In general, okay, audience as active, and another one is audience as passive. All right. If we were to discuss about audience as active, we cannot run away from discussing about theory. Okay. Audience as active, meaning audience actually is not just wait for information to be fed into their mouth. Yeah, they actually reacting. They actually can be proactive. They can ask you questions, and if they look at the advertisement that you show, they may ask a lot of questions, and eventually they may not trust you. Okay, so that is what we call audience as active. They did not just simply accept what you say. All right. So, for example, uh, modern theory actually always talk as audience as active. Let us look at. I believe you have already you know this theory. Yeah? Users and gratification theory and reception theory argue that audience are active participants. So we, for example, we as media content producer, when we write something or produce something, or when we interact with people, we promote our product, or maybe we came out with our short movies, or we are as presenters, influencer, or newscaster, we cannot perceive them as passive or will not argue on the things that we say to them. They definitely will argue, maybe they believe or maybe they don't believe. So users and gratification theory actually talking about users, audience use the media because they want to satisfy themselves. Gratification is to satisfy themselves. So people use or maybe watch your TikTok because they want to satisfy themselves. They will not use or watch any media content or things like that if it is not satisfying. Okay, so that is modern theory number one. Number two is reception theory related to users and gratification theory, meaning that audience, humans actually just accept something that can give benefit to them. One of the things is to satisfy them. So these two theories actually say that audience is not passive. Audience is active because only things that can satisfy us will make us happy. Okay, so audience actually select and interpret and respond to media based on personal needs. Whatever things that you give them, they will react whether they accept or trust or make negative meanings or positive meaning based on what they want, what they need. Their experiences, for example, they have many experiences using similar brand and similar products, and it did not work out, and you cannot expect them to trust what you said. Okay, and it's also based on social context. Yeah, a group of people with did not look at a certain, for example, skincare as an important product, will not buy the ideas that you share on social media. So you have got to understand that. So they can accept, they can negotiate. I like this word, negotiate, meaning that they can ask you questions, they can argue with you, they can give their reasons not to trust you, and eventually they can trust you or not trusting you, or they can reject the intended message that you wanted to give to them. All right. For example, a student watching a TikTok skincare video might agree with you. All right. Or partly agree because they might be a little bit skeptical on it. They may want to negotiate with you or just reject the advice entirely. Just watch your video for 15 seconds and they laugh. All right. So the audience behavior also we have got to understand. So the key takeaway here, audience and media interpretation, engagement, meaning making is very close with each other, and we have got to understand audience that watch your video for 15 minutes does not mean they trust you and they can buy your idea. Okay, they can leave after 15 minutes and will not trusting you. Similarly, when a group of people watching your video for only 2 minutes, automatically they can trust you. Okay, because it's satisfying them. So we have got to understand audience as active and audience as passive. Okay, let's move on. Let's look at what is audience as passive. So when we talk about audience as passive, as communication scholar, we always relate it to the older theory, early media theories. One of it, when I was at school, when I was studying, we learned about hypodermic needle. I'm not so sure if you learned this at your university or we learn about magic bullet theory, which these theories actually viewed audience as passive recipient of media message. In simpler words, whatever you give to the audience, they will just accept it. All right. Media in this theory is seen as a very powerful and persuasive tool, very powerful, and injecting, giving you the ideas directly into the audience mind. Audience actually did not query, did not negotiate, did not ask, and just accept the content without question, simply influenced by what they saw and heard. So this actually situation pretty much true perhaps in the 1930s, in the 1940s and 60s, yeah, when there is only one medium of communication, for example, okay, newspaper and radio, and in the 70s came about TV, and 90s blogs and internet, yeah, end of 1990s we we learn about internet and so forth. So long time ago, because the medium or the media is very limited, so they accept as it is, because like now we can know what happened in Thailand, you can know what happened in Malaysia just by scrolling or googling on the net. um, So long time ago, we don't know what happened in our neighboring countries, for example. So we accept things as it is. So that is why the early media theorists perceive audience as passive. Okay. So the key idea here, actually, the media directly give effect media content to the audience and they interpret it as it is. So if we go back to the example that I give, radio broadcasts or propaganda were thought to immediate shape public opinion. So in the 30s, 50s, it is, I would say, easy to shape public opinion on certain issues. because the media itself is very limited. All right, totally different from what we are having right now. Yeah, so media is passive, media is active. I have one question to ask you. Maybe you can think of it later on. If I were to say that this happened in 1930s and 1950s, do you really think now they are perhaps a group of audiences who are still very passive? Okay, this is something for us to ponder and to think. Maybe one day when I go to Thailand, we can discuss further about this question. Yeah. So let's dive deeper on the theory related to audience. I've already mentioned a little bit. Let us look at it again. The first one is users and gratification theory. Users meaning that we use, and we gratification means we satisfy. This first theory was the proponents are Bloomer and Kant, very old, 1974, but they actually in 1980 they actually redefined users and gratification. When they first started introducing users and gratification, it's really very much a quantitative theory to get quantitative research. But after some times, after I think about 2 decades, even the proponent Bloomer and Kant, you realize that because they were talking about gratifications that satisfying audience themselves, so they wanted to know the hows and whys. So now users and gratification theory has like two genders. It can guide quantitative research and it can also guide qualitative research. So this is the earlier, I would say earlier and popular theory that talk about audience study. So audience actively chooses media to satisfy their needs. All right. Let me give one example about myself. Sometimes before I sleep, I just scroll to see Instagram feed for like 5-10 minutes before I sleep. Okay. And I feel satisfied a little bit to look at few content that I like best, for example, traveling and also environmental issues, for example. So that is very simple example that I can give to you. So main needs for people, for audience to look at is for information, all right, for entertainment, for personal identity, and for social construction. The example that I gave just now, whereby I like scrolling, before I sleep, it is meant for information. If I were to tell this to my student will say, oh, that is, you are trying to find information. Yeah, especially on environmental issues, information. But actually, because I love environment, it's not only information, but I actually treat it as entertainment before I sleep. Okay, and also it's personal identity, my identity. A lot of people in University Science Malaysia know that my field is on environment, so this is my personal identity as well. So it covers when I scroll for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Actually, the needs that I'm covering is not only information, but it's also entertainment and also personal identity. uh, so maybe this slide, maybe when you watch this and ask yourself, uh, do I really satisfy myself when I scroll social media or talk to my friend or go to certain website? Okay, so then you understand what is users and gratification. Then only by understanding that you understand why audience study is important, right? For example, students watch TikTok news for quick updates and entertainment. You can take my example, the example that I give just now. So this is first theory that related to audience study. So when you do research in during your undergrad, or if you intend to do it during your master or PhD later on, if you want to study about audience, maybe you can consider using uses and gratification theory in your research. Okay, number 2 is reception theory. Reception theory argues that audiences interpret messages differently. All right, reception theory is was introduced by Stuart Hall twice in 1973, quite old, and 1980. So reception theory always related to audience study. And for your information, Stuart Hall, not exactly a media scholar or communication scholar. He actually focuses more on culture. All right, a culture scholar in cultural studies. All right, so according to him, audience actually interpret messages differently. So they are segmentation of audience. That is why when we wanted to learn about audience, we must understand that audience have different background, different interests, and different experiences. So because of that, they actually look at your message differently. So never, even though you are looking for a group of people, but never assume that they will say yes or no to the message that you give them. All right. So there are 3 types of readings. We call it readings on the audience. The first one is dominant, meaning that when you give one message to a short documentary, for example, to a group of people, they agree with the message. So we call it dominant. But they can be partly agree, not to say they trust or not trusting, but they are negotiating because they are not so sure about the content that you provide, or maybe they are not trusting the content that you provide because they experience different things. So it is called negotiated. The third one is oppositional, disagree totally. They watch your content for 2 seconds or 5 seconds and they will say, no, I'm not going to continue watching this. All right. Even though you tell them that the skincare that you are selling within 2 days have already been bought by 500 people. Okay, maybe why we have got to understand why this group of people disagreeing with us. Maybe most probably because of their experiences, past experiences. So understanding reception, how do they accept and receive the media messages that you provide to them is very important. Why didn't they want to accept it? Why did they want to accept it? We have got to understand that. So for example, a news report may be trusted by some but criticized by others. You, for example, you are a journalist, you write a report and then you publish in your organization or media outlets that you work on, and a lot of netizen, in Malaysia we call it netizen, people, public. Netizen is Netizens. The public will condemn the report that the news that you put on. Okay, we'll say that you are biased, we are not trusting this content and things like that. But some might say yes, yeah. So that is reception. They accept or not. So this is something that being discussed by Stuart Hall. This very much based on culture, yeah, very much based on culture and belief, customs, because Stuart Hall is not communication scholar, but he's actually more uh, uh, focusing on culture studies, yeah. So this is theory number 2. It's still under audience study, but I actually wanting to link you to theory so that hoping that you understand it more. Okay. Okay. The last theory, number 3, still by Stuart Hall, and the dates, if you were to see, similar to the second theory just now. He actually came out in 1973. This model, it's not a theory, it's a model, encoding and decoding model, and he actually revising it again in 1980. For your information, encoding and decoding model actually link to the reception theory that we discussed just now. Okay, I put it separately because in certain research, sometimes we focus on decoding and encoding. Sometimes we just want to look at how audience accepting the message that we give or not. That's it. So encoding and decoding, very important. Okay, because it's related. Before we can understand reception, we must understand that encoding is for media producer. For example, journalists, influencer, editors. We encode the message. For example, we want people or our audience to understand the message that we want to give to them. So our audience may be very huge, okay? Some are very educated, maybe some are not very educated. So we have got to understand. We try to make meaning, trying to simplify the message so that all the group of audiences understand what the message that you want to give. That's why we call it encode, all right? So when we understand the media or communication framework, the sender and receiver, so audience is the receiver, the end of the communication linear process. Okay, so audience will decode. We try decode meaning that this is the code that we give and they decode it, try to understand, make meaning based on their backgrounds, experiences, and a lot more. So actually, we encode and decode first, then only we accept and not accepting the message. Meaning that I am trying to say encode and decoding is the first theory for us to understand before we can understand the reception theory, the theory number 2 just now. Okay, so this is the first stage, and the second stage is the reception theory. But I put it as theory number 3 because a lot of us, when we study about, we want to do research on audience, we do the reception theory. To guide us, we take reception theory to guide us. Yeah. So in the end, when we talk about encoding and decoding, the key takeaway is that meaning is not fixed. Even though you may find a group of people that you want to study say A or say yes to the message that you give them, but maybe after 2 months they say no to it. Okay, so meaning is not fixed, never fixed. All right, the way they decode and the way we encode and the way they decode actually can change. We also, as media producer, media content producer, can also be audience. Yeah, can also be audience. Our legs, one as media producer, media content producer, and another leg may fall under audience as an audience. So it's not fixed. Yeah. So with these 3 theories, I hope if you intend to do audience study, these 3 theories can guide your research. Look back at your objective, look back at your research question, it will guide you. Yeah. Okay. So after we learn what is audience study, the steps of audience study. Why is it important? The qualitative method and approaches to audience study, and what are the theories that link to audience study. Here are some discussion questions. If you want to start an audience study, you can use these questions to guide. Yeah, do audiences, the first one, do audiences still trust mainstream media? So if you are studying TikTok, for example, you can tweak the question: do audience trust TikTok content on, for example, on political news? Yeah, you can use this guided question to lead on for you to start on with your audience research. Or you can ask, how does social media change audience behavior? Because we talked about their behavior, their attitude as well, few characteristics of audience that we must know. When do they watch TV, listen to radio, or scroll their social media, and things like that. Number three, are audiences more active today than before? Okay, you can tweak a little bit this question. For example, are audiences, elderly audiences, more active in the morning or at night, for example? Because it will help you. These are very simple questions, but it can guide your research so that you can tweak it and you can refine and revise it so that it can give you guide to come out with very effective questions for your research. Okay, these are of course there are a lot more questions that you can pose, but I just give you three, the main ones, so that you can use it and change it a little bit, refine it to adapt to the research that you want to study. Yeah. Okay. In summary, this is, I think this is my last slide. Yes. In summary, if we want to start, if you have feeling and feel that you are interested to the audience study, we have got to understand. First, audience is active. Okay, I asked just now, maybe this is for us to ponder, is now audience still passive? But of course, in this lecture, actually, as a summary, audience is active and it's really diverse. Even if you want to study your university students, even though they are your university students, but they are diverse. All right. Number two, very important, meaning is constructed. All right. Socially constructed. Sorry, I have got to put socially constructed. Meaning is socially constructed. Sometimes you mix with your friend. When you at home, you're thinking about certain issue is different. But when you mix with your friend at university, you think about the same issue and it's slightly turned negative or perhaps positive. It is not fixed, yeah, because we are just human beings. Sometimes we get influenced by our friends. Sometimes we are really firm on the things that we understand, and the things that we believe. Yeah. Number three, we talk about theories. Just now, theories actually help explain media use and interpretation. That's why in today's lecture, I want to introduce theories that very much related to audience study so that it can guide you. And because these theories actually help explain media use and how audience is inter, interpreting the media message, how media is used by audience and how do they interpret it. Yeah. So number four and the last bit is essential. Audience study is essential for communication, effective communication and research. Is very, very important. Regardless if you are uh, you are in journalism study or filming or strategic communication, public relation, this audience is very important because This is communication field at large, and we deal with audience. Yeah, we deal with our audience. These are the summaries that I can give to you for this lecture. Now let's look at the last page. These are the references. I actually, in all my slides, I try to list down all the references that I use. I hope you can find it online. I know that, for example, Molly is quite old. It's quite old, but I'm not so sure. But you, if you were to Google it, some parts of it can be found on the internet. Molly, there are two references here. Uh, these readings are very good one to understand about audience. Yeah, this is Stuart Hall's work. I have it in my room. I have it here. Okay, and actually Sunda talk a lot about Bloomer and Kahn's uses and gratification theory. Yeah, of course, if you read Bloomer and Kahn's, it's really very old. It's published in 1970s, but other researchers actually have already managed to talk or refine the theories again. Yeah, and you can find more recent arguments and information about Bloomer and Kahn's theory that is uses and gratification, which is very closely related to audience study. Guys, with that, I would like to thank everyone for watching this video. I hope to see you again next week. And I hope you have a good day ahead. Thank you very much, everyone.